What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian. Okay, so one of the most recent laws in Russia says that if you are growing mint or sage in the backyard, well, you can actually go to jail for this. Because the big concentration of these plants, it contains some very unacceptable components, which are illegal in Russia. Long story short, the punishment for this, it starts, for example, as $2,500. Option number 2, you can go to jail for 2 years for growing those things in your backyard once again. So yeah, you can either select between saving a couple of dollars by not buying mint from your local groceries, or you can just go to jail for a couple of years. Well, this is gardening Russian style. This was a pretty clown trip for today's episode. Now let's get serious. First of all, let me give you a very brief update from the south and the eastern front lines. First of all, from Crimean Peninsula, local residents reported some very loud noises. Next we have a video from Belgorod, obviously on the territory of Russia, and this was one of the very first times when Ukrainians used HIMARS to destroy a control point of the Z army. In Kharkov we can see a very big number of Russian armored vehicles called VPK 59095S, like literally 85 a total number of these trucks was spotted at least, which allows us to assume that potentially Russians would want to try and launch a new offensive along Kharkov front line because the previous one completely yielded zero results while still wasting tens of thousands of soldiers. Does Putin care about his soldiers? Well, the answer is most likely no, but this is just a fraction of what he is ready to lose. We're gonna talk about this very soon. Next is the picture from Kupiansk, where Russians used FAB 1500 and literally dropped it in the middle of residential area. Like, they did not even try to target anything else. Along Crimean front line in Serebryansky forest, we can see a body cam footage of a Ukrainian soldier. They're pretty much assaulting the positions of Russians. By the way, in today's episode there will be a lot of photos and videos which unfortunately I will need to censor to comply with YouTube. So guys, if you want to see fully uncensored episode, it is on my Patreon as always. The link to my Patreon is down below. If you remember from my previous episode, Ukrainians were almost semi-encircled in the settlement called Progress, and well, recently we received relatively good news that Ukrainians were able to avoid this encirclement. They retreated a little bit, and they still continued defending against advancing Russians. Also, if you remember from approximately a month or two ago, whenever Russians they took Avdiivka, one of the main temporarily military bases was located on the territory of Avdiivka Kaksahim factory. Well, Ukrainians they know it, Russians do not go away from this factory, which allows Ukrainians to attack it, well, as you can see from this video, and they're doing this quite successfully. In Donetsk, Ukrainians destroyed another air defense system of Russians called Pantsir S-1. And then along Marinka front line, a simple Ukrainian FPV drone was able to cause a massive fireworks of a Russian infantry fighting vehicle BMP-2. And by the way, in the last couple of days, Ukrainians were able to repel one of the biggest attacks since the beginning of this war by Russians, which included more than 45 armored vehicles of various kinds, and this happened next to Kurakhove. And then ultimately in Novostepovo, an entire S-300 air defense complex of Russians was destroyed, which included at least 9 S-19 radar and 4 launchers. And so yeah, so like I did mention several minutes ago, one of the main questions of this video, does Putin really care about the Z army and his Z soldiers? Well, as you can imagine, the answer would be no, because according to the Western military intelligence, assuming the current pace of war we're seeing right now from both sides, assuming nothing will change, unfortunately Russia might prevail and Russia might capture the territories it wants to capture, but it will take them at least 5 years at a cost of 1.8 million soldiers. So, do you think Putin will stop? Do you think Putin will care about those people? Absolutely not, because if he cared in the first place, there will be no war at all, or it will be over in the very near future, as long as there is some kind of negotiations from both sides, from Russia and Ukraine. Both countries will talk and there will be some sort of peaceful resolution. Well, we are in 2.5 years of this insanity at this point, so well, yeah, you can see Putin does not care that much. And assuming Putin proceeds with this almost indefinite plan of capturing Kherson, Zaporozhye, Luhansk and Donetsk regions once again at the cost of 1.8 million people, at that point, several years later, there will be no longer citizens of Russia left whose war will not literally affect directly. Every single family in Russia will have either family members, relatives or friends who went to Ukraine and never returned. Literally every single family will be affected by that time. So if Russians will not protest, if Russians will not do anything about this against the regime of Putin, unfortunately, well, I don't even know what else will trigger them to go on the streets. And by the way, speaking about these peace negotiations, recently the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia said, Sergei Lavrov, he said absolute nonsense. He literally contradicted himself in 2 sentences in a row. First of all, he said that, if there are some kind of peace negotiations, Russia will not stop special military operation even during these negotiations. And the very next sentence he said that Russia never declined peace talks in the first place. And the reason, according to Sergei Lavrov, why would Russia continue combat activities even during peace negotiations, it is because Ukraine and the West lied to Russia back in April 2022. Whenever there was some sort of peace talks, Russia was promised that activities will stop, but activities never stopped, even though everything was happening on the territory of Ukraine, so I have no idea why Russia is complaining. Russia was the one who was advancing, and then they were like, well, combat activities did happen, you lied to us, we're never ever gonna believe you again. And also, if you remember, a couple of days ago, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Dmitry Kuleba, he did go to China, and as a result of this trip, he said that Ukraine is ready to propose their own statements to Russia about peace negotiations, and even Ukraine is ready to hear what Russia has to propose. So this is one of the biggest invitations for Russia to participate in peace negotiations. Even China was listening to the statements by Ukraine. So yes, if Russia was always claiming we never decline peace talks, now is the time for them to accept them. And literally before this trip, before Dmitry Kuleba went to China, Dmitry Peskov said, once again, Russia never declined peace negotiations, we're just waiting for Ukraine to be ready for peace talks, and then we're gonna have peace talks, we promise. And well, after this trip to China, then Dmitry Peskov said, well, we don't see any certainty, we don't see any definite proposals from Ukraine, we are not sure what we're even gonna discuss during these peace talks. For this reason, we do not feel comfortable participating in peace negotiations with Ukraine at this point, so we decline, we refuse them. Well, this is your Russian Diplomacy 101, say that you're ready, but when actually something is coming up, you say that we are not ready. And speaking about the assistance from the West, in order to organize these peace negotiations, or at least force one of the sides to comply. So, Trump administration, if he is elected as the next president, obviously we don't know if it's gonna happen or not yet, but if he's gonna get elected, this is what he said to the Russian representatives, to the Russian authorities. If Ukraine proposes peace talks and you guys decline to participate in these peace talks, we're gonna increase the military and financial support to Ukraine as much and for as long as you're gonna be declining peace negotiations. You decline it once again, we're gonna increase it more. You decline another time, we're gonna increase it even more. Well, eventually you will be forced to talk with Ukraine. Well, at this point, most likely Ukraine will be the one with the upper hand. But for now, unfortunately, ultimately Ukraine has to accept the current condition as normal, I guess I would say. For this reason, they started to literally build entire underground cities and underground schools for kids. So guys, let's talk about this right now on my Patreon. If you want to continue watching and support the channel, the best thing you can do right now, just trust me. Go ahead and check my Patreon, once again the link is down below. Thanks so much. Well, there you have it guys, thank you so much for watching, please like this video, subscribe to my channel. If this was interesting, informative or both, useful links are down below, PayPal donations, Patreon, Instagram, hoodies, merch and everything else. And so thanks so much for watching, see you tomorrow.